African American people are the seed that came from Africa that was planted in the soil of America that needed to be scattered throughout the land and was fruitful and has multiplied everything that it touched. When the Emancipation Proclamation came about, the forced migration of African American people, fleeing the violence, the lack of opportunity, the lack of housing, the even contrived ways to keep people impoverished, and even with a second kind of slavery through sharecropping that never came profitable for the sharer. You think about those things and you realize that the only way that this nation could thrive was for the Black people to begin to disperse. And it's really interesting to me how adversity causes people to move and migrate to better, hopeful, better opportunities. Once people left the South, they dispersed depending on where they were enslaved, or where they were sold to, where they were emancipated from. They migrated mostly toward the north, but some to the west, some actually getting all the way to California. And everywhere they went, there was an impact on culture, on cuisine, on community, and even on faith.
The Black church has meant so much to our personhood, to our liberty, to our freedom. It gave birth to the civil rights movement. And I said, Black people will never leave the Black church, but that is not the case today. So I'm concerned about the future of the Black church, because my generation and the one under me obviously were not as effective as we would hope to see that our offspring would keep the Black church strong and be a part of it. The two younger generations of not just Black children, of Black young people, but of all young people in the West, have not been nurtured or brought up in the church.
In many cases, the church has been segregated or separated from where the greatest need is. And so a movement we're a part of, called Christian Community Development, realized that they were onto something. It had to do with theological shifts that were happening, the scriptures regarding God's heart for the poor, the preferential option for the poor were being rediscovered. There was a compelling desire to do something different, to engage with what now we call an incarnational missiology, which meant that if we were going to be part of the solution, joining our community, and we'd have to live among. So there is a migration story in those early Christian community developers. And the theory of change, therefore, is if you listen to the community, if you learn from them, if you love them, if you join them, solutions will be discovered. We begin with a sense that we're on God's side by doing this kind of work. Christian community development is joining God where He is. You see, He never fled. He's not a white flighter. He's a move into the neighborhood kind of God, according to John 1:14. And so we join Him in His effort.
Black South is a nonprofit, a 501c3 that will be starting in 2025 in Durham, North Carolina. Spending this year, 2024, doing a lot of the development work to make that happen. And so Black South's vision and heart is to see Black neighborhoods and Black communities flourish by bringing 3 different projects that we're wanting to start into the city. One is martial arts. I've trained in martial arts for over 20 years, and so want to take that skill along with leadership development principles and merge it together to help develop the next leaders in the city through athletics. And then the other project is creating some type of spiritual formation learning space for people, for them to learn about who God is and God's heart for people, and viewing God from a Black lens and from the lens of those who've historically been oppressed and set on the margins of society. And then the last project is called Creative Justice, which is a term that my wife had developed through a training that she went through.
Yeah, creative justice is simply telling the truth in art form and what it might look like to nurture an arts community that starts this process of healing and liberation through truth telling. And so those are the 3 projects that we desire to bring to Durham, North Carolina under Black South.
Durham is a big city with a small town heart. I think that people come from all walks of life and walk the streets of Durham and live here and play here and worship here. And we're all part of this mosaic. It's not a melting pot because we're not all the same, but we're all interlinked and connected. And we paint this picture of, this place that people come to be better and to continue to grow.
From what I can see a lot has changed or in the process of changing. So I'm glad to see people mingling as far as the races are concerned. It's growing. It's growing leaps and bounds. I'm really shocked at the amount of growth that it's doing.
I come from Michigan, big city. Durham has much more of a community feel. Everyone's really nice. You can pretty much talk to people all the time out on the street and people are really friendly. But there's also just a lot of beauty out here, I would say.
Durham has a certain grittiness to it, a certain little bit. That's why there's the nickname of Dirty Durham and everything. And there's some part of that is negative because Durham does have some gangster mentality and some other kind of mentalities that are part of it. But I do think that Durham has a certain grittiness, a certain uniqueness about it that most cities don't have and everything. Durham, I think, has one, that rich history, and 2, it just has that kind of gritty appeal that to me is what is the appeal that I even find a lot of my creative community likes as well. Most of the people that have a greater understanding of Durham understand what I just said. Even those that passed on, they understood the legacy of what they were stepping into and they understood the history. So Durham also has a very rich history and all along those lines, and a very activist history as well, because there's a lot of activism that has been taking place here, whether it's civil rights activism, whether it's activism in the women's rights or a number of other activism spaces. So it's always had that activist space. I mean, myself, in the early days of in the early days of this area, I was involved in Occupy Durham, which was part of the Occupy movement. And I could even see the grittiness when we would be in what had different names, but right now is considered like the town square where the bull is, but at times it was been called Freedom Park or a number of other names that are down there, but definitely has that kind of grittiness to it that is the appeal to me of this city. And like I said, I've traveled to other places. I went to Milwaukee to go to school, went to Boca Raton, Florida to work in a newspaper for a hot second, and I've definitely traveled just to visit other places like Vegas and New York and DC and a couple of other places. But Durham is truly home, and it will always be home, and it just has a certain unique character to it that I thoroughly admire.
Why Black South? Because of this concept that we were introduced to called reverse migration. All the reasons why people have fled and leave the South, of now going back to those spaces and kind of reclaiming that narrative of the South and the land, instead of it being a place of horror and pain, of seeing the beauty that's there and turn it into a place of refuge, a sanctuary of healing and growth and development for African Americans and African American communities.
And I think that there's a huge part of Black cultural identity that is in the soil in the South. And I think that that is where Black South grew up from, grew up out of, was this knowledge of our ancestors and our history, and up came from the soil, the nonprofit Black South. On both sides of my family, the Mississippi Delta, that's where my ancestors come from. They were a part of cotton picking and slavery and a lot of horrific things that happened there, but they were also a part of the Great Migration from Mississippi up to Chicago, and that's where my life begins.
My family has been in North Carolina since like the 1830s, so as far back as I can go. I was born in Hickory, North Carolina. And so some of the family that's there and the rootedness that's there is the reason for Durham. I think also because the rich Black history that's there. Durham had its own Black Wall Street at some point and had a vibrant Black neighborhood and community. And so we wanted to go back there to be part of the efforts to bring the vibrancy and back to that space and the development of it.
This is our life's work. I would say that this is something we feel we must do. We have connected to our roots. We have done our ancestry work and are continuing to do it. And this is so tied to where we come from. And this is so tied to what we see ourselves doing for the rest of our lives. This is like our life's work is in this lane of Black South. And so we're excited to begin this journey.
Yeah, I'm even echo and say, we believe it's a big mission and can't do it alone. And so, like this year, we're gathering a team and wanting to gather people that want to help make this mission and this dream into reality.